Is your ongoing deck not going? Is your bounce deck simply bouncing your win rate down? Then you might need Shou-Lao. A few weeks ago, I was suggesting that Shou-Lao get a little bit of a light touch as a nerf, mostly to take it out of Merlin decks so we could see what the problem was. The haters said, KM, that's ridiculous, it's so clearly Shou-Lao and he's so clearly ridiculously good. I would just like to say that the haters were totally right. Shout out to the haters. Shou-Lao has gone from a meta tyrant to a meta cannibal. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. About 6 weeks ago, the modern Shou-Lao deck emerged. It was built mostly, if not entirely, around Shou-Lao. The Jocasta actually a little bit of a flex spot between Copycat and Jocasta. Mostly what this deck was trying to do is do something ridiculous with Shou-Lao across the general space of a Marvel Snap game. This deck was quite a bit too strong, and in the context of this deck alone, Shou-Lao was actually meaningfully nerfed. But what has happened since the nerfs to the Shou-Lao deck is that Shou-Lao himself has branched out, and rather than becoming the one centralizing deck dominating a metagame, he has instead become part of a small package you add to pretty much every deck that is playing a normal game of Marvel Snap and improve that deck drastically. So what we're going to look at is the successors to Shou-Lao's dominance, because the nerfs to Shou-Lao and his deck did impact this deck. This deck doesn't really work anymore. But Shou-Lao as a small package has started to eat a lot of the space that would normally be occupied by relatively diverse decks. So let's dive in to all of the lists that are running Shou-Lao right now and what he's adding to each of them. The most obvious place to start is Shou-Lao Hydra Stomper, which was a hybrid that emerged basically immediately upon the death of the previous iteration of the all-in Shou-Lao deck. Even before that happened, it was already developing, with the idea being that even though the all-in Shou-Lao deck was more consistent at Shou-Laoing, the Hydra Stomper deck was good enough at doing everything else that the matchup wasn't really that bad and could arguably be in favor of the Hydra Stomper player as long as both players were both playing Shou-Lao. What that means is that this was sort of the herald of things to come. Now, there are so many other decks that are meaningfully able to be hybrid Shou decks. What characteristics are we looking for, and what is the actual Shou-Lao package? Well, at baseline, it's Shou-Lao, Maverick, and probably Kate Bishop, and maybe a Kitty Pryde. But some decks are just going to be able to, by the nature of their own decks, afford to play a Shou-Lao on their own. And because of the numbers he outputs, he can, even on his own, be an additionally powerful piece to those decks. What he adds here is a second nut draw kind of deal, where it's like, okay, I didn't get my Batroc scaling going, but I still played cards, and because I still played cards, I effectively spent the entire game building up my Shou-Lao, and that means that if I have my Maverick and my Shou-Lao, I have a combo endgame. What it does is raise both the floor and ceiling of archetypes that it is spliced into. The Shou-Lao Maverick combo means that you can come from behind even when you aren't necessarily doing the strongest early game stuff that you'd want to be doing. And when you are doing the strong early game stuff, what it does is take you over the top of everything by a very wide margin. It allows you to distribute your points incredibly efficiently, and it allows you, frankly, to have a ton of them. This is the sort of OG of let's just put Shou-Lao in a mid-range deck, but I personally believe that we have gotten to a point that that is a good strategy for at least 4 other decks. This is Shou-Lao Destroy. It is my favorite Destroy list right now, and the reason for that is that Destroy's weakness has always been that while it does combo very high, it combos very high mostly with a very specific combination of early game cards. So when you aren't scaling up a Deadpool, a lot of the time what you're doing is twiddling your thumbs and spinning your wheels. You're blowing up X23s and you're like, I gotta use this energy on something. You're just playing a bunch of cards and hoping they add up to a cheap death, and maybe you'll be able to play a null of reasonable size alongside that cheap death. What this does when you add Shou-Lao Maverick to the deck is convert all those games where you're spinning your wheels into games where you are playing a 15 power Shou-Lao on a Maverick and then playing something else alongside it. Now, this is one of the few decks that really doesn't have to go out of its way to get maximum value from Shou-Lao. You don't have to be playing Kate Bishop and Kitty Pryde in here to feel pretty confident that you're going to be able to fulfill Shou-Lao's condition of playing 2 cards a turn. But this is where I started to get worried, and I think if it was just this, I maybe wouldn't have made this video, but we're kind of getting to a real spot where anything that can play Shou-Lao should be playing Shou-Lao, and that's kind of what we should be paying attention to right now. That is the thing I'd like to focus on, because this is a deck that is sort of very kind of reasonable. Like, Destroy's not like a horrendously bad deck, but you get to the point where when you have a deck and it can play Shou-Lao, the only real question you should be asking is, why aren't you playing Shou-Lao? In fact, it should be obvious that this should be a Shou-Lao deck. I felt stupid when I realized, oh yeah, this works. I should have seen that a million miles away. And that's sort of the critical eye that we kind of now have to turn on the rest of the metagame. If a deck can be a Shou-Lao deck, there's nothing except inertia keeping it from being that. And this is, to my mind, clearly an improvement on the previous Destroy decks. Clearly significantly better. And I think that that is a marker of what Shou-Lao can and has done, which is just be very strong in a very centralizing way. It is taking these decks that were functionally kind of the same decks for 3 years and saying, look, give up some of what you're doing because what I'm doing is just worth it. It is going to be a ton of points. You already do what I'm asking you to do. You can double it with a Maverick. And in this deck, you even have some additional synergy with Maverick because you have other things that add stats and other things that double points. So it's not even like you're giving up that much. And that's the core principle of what makes Shou-Lao continue to show up in all of these weird places is you just aren't actually giving up anything compared to what the output is. Yeah, okay, I really wasn't going to be planning on playing 2 cards a turn. You got me. Yeah, sometimes I have to hold a 1-drop to turn 2 so I can play it alongside another 1-drop. You got me. Like, that kind of stuff just simply isn't that big of a sacrifice. It's giving up the worst destroyer in the entire deck, Deathlock, and a payoff that very often won by colossal amounts that were totally unnecessary, null, in order to get a really efficient backup plan to when you are not deadpooling off. I cannot overstate just how beneficial to the deck that is. Honifer's Shou-Lao ongoing list is really what pushed this into sort of post-production. This video had been sitting in my memory banks for a little bit, and then when this started to break out, it's like, all right, we got to talk about this guy, because this is a very, very reasonable list, and it makes sense to me that doing something like this is beneficial, because this is a Shou-Lao list that is hybridizing in such a way that it is aiming to have more points than the other Shou-Lao lists, which is a very viable and, I won't say obvious, it's a very smart thing to do. This is a hybrid Shou-Lao ongoing list that is built to stack up points in ways that other Shou-Lao hybrid decks are not going to be able to meaningfully deal with. In other words, this is the one that is getting the closest to being a full combo version of this. You have multiple ways to make sure your Maverick is good, doing things like putting it in the back line behind a Captain Carter Moonstone lane will allow you to redistribute a ton of the points available to you. I talked to Honifer about this list a little bit, and a lot of what brought it on for him was that he felt like Star-Lord got pretty meaningfully nerfed, so the best thing to do was to just go play around in the other most fertile garden, which was Shou-Lao. The other thing he said was that since he was practicing for Golden Gauntlet, he's not playing Mercury in this list, but he thinks that you probably should. They're just not entirely sure if that combination of Mercury and Moonstone is still going to be bugged and thus potentially banned from being played in the same list as it was in previous Golden Gauntlet events. That said, the point here is pretty straightforward. If you are a deck, like a typical archetypal deck in Marvel Snap, you will probably be better playing Shou-Lao than doing the thing your deck is about. Ongoing has been a deck in Marvel Snap for 3 years. Destroy has been a deck in Marvel Snap for 3 years. These are not cards that have any, or archetypes that have any sincere, massive overlap with Shou-Lao. He is just going to be good enough that you put him in Maverick in your decks, and that constitutes a meta-level game plan. Now, I do think that both Destroy and this list have some notable overlaps with Maverick that make it a little less simple than what I'm talking about here, but it really is pretty minimal in terms of what you need in order to get a lot of value out of a Shou-Lao. I'm not entirely sure that bounce and werewolf stuff fits exactly in the paradigm that I've been outlining here, but I do think it's probably worth talking about as well, because this is a case where you're just looking at a card and you're saying it's better than what I want to be doing anyway. I don't really want to be a Hitmonkey deck. I would much rather be a Shou-Lao deck. When you look at the cards Shou-Lao is displacing, a lot of them are like not necessarily more interesting cards, but cards that were staples in the archetype. And I think that's the thing I want to specifically speak to, right? Like, this is a card that is eating up spaces in other archetypes that made those archetypes unique and making them less unique by virtue of them just being reduced to Shou-Lao decks. This is perhaps the least of the like, oh, it's an obvious Shou-Lao deck in the sense that it's not running Maverick, but it is just an obvious Shou-Lao deck on play pattern in the sense that it's playing a lot of cards. And if you're playing a lot of cards, you probably just want to be playing Shou-Lao because he's going to put 12 to 15 power on something, and you're generally pretty happy to get 12 to 15 power out of your 5-drop. This is what I'm kind of driving at here, is I thought that by nerfing Merlin and getting rid of the Shou-Lao deck as constructed, this would be a meaningful knock to Shou-Lao. And it kind of was. Like, if you look at a lot of these decks, I think they're a little harder to understand, a little harder to play, a little hard. Like these are more complex decks. They're more interesting. They're more dynamic. And the very easy flowcharty version of the deck is gone and is worse. And that's real. But I do think that what has happened as a sort of sub-consequence of that is it's almost like the fall of the Roman Empire, where it's just splitting into all of these successor states that occupy the same territory. And it's like, they're all like, oh, I'm the Roman Empire too. Like, it's all very much like that. And I think that that kind of thing is the big noticeable part of this for me, where we've gone from one centralized Shou-Lao deck that everyone kind of knew about to a bunch of like splintered successor states, all of which are really good, all of which are better by virtue of carrying on the legacy of Shou-Lao. And that's the specific dynamic that I wanted to talk about. I tend to believe that Marvel Snap is a better game when decks that have identity are a big part of the metagame. Like, my famous take that I say basically all the time is I think Marvel Snap is in its best position when Destroy is at the top of the metagame, and part of that is that Destroy is a deck that has a very coherent identity, and part of that is that Destroy is a deck that has a lot of ways to deal with it, and both of those are important. I think it's good that a top deck be assailable, and I think it's even better that that top deck have a definable and interesting and unique mechanical identity. What I don't like is that it feels like if I want to play one of those decks that is a mechanically unique piece of identity, I have to pick the ones that play nice with Shou-Lao. I can't play Silver Surfer, really, because I would rather just be playing Shou-Lao than playing Silver Surfer. I can't play Discard, really, because I can't play MODOK and Shou-Lao in the same decks. And so you end up with what is and is not a viable identity to have. I'm a Destroy gamer, I'm an ongoing gamer, I'm a bounce gamer, is determined by your proximity to Shou-Lao. Everything you're allowed to do in these spaces, which are, in my opinion, these are like time-honored niches in Marvel Snap. It's supposed to be like this. There's supposed to be a bounce deck. There's supposed to be a discard deck. There's supposed to be a surfer deck. There's supposed to be an ongoing deck. And to have the viability of those lists determined entirely by your proximity to Shou-Lao and whether or not you have Shou-Lao, I feel like that's not a great thing. And that's really what I wanted to talk about in this video. I also wanted to use it as a backdoor way of saying, like, hey, here's 4 awesome decks you can play if you're not off-put by that. Like, I do think these are really good decks. I cannot stress that enough. Basically, all of these decks are super sick and you can climb with them. But I really wanted to talk about just like the effect Shou-Lao is having on the game, what I thought would happen when they nerfed it, which would be Shou-Lao kind of goes away, And what actually happened when they nerfed it is successor states to Shou-Lao take up as much or more of the metagame share as the original one centralized Roman Empire actually did. It is quite an interesting situation. I'm not going to cast a value judgment on it one way or the other. Personally, I'd prefer if these decks got tools to stand on their own, but I understand why some people might enjoy this. That said, I will say that I've been KMBest. You have been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one. Oh, and by the way, I misspoke earlier. I was like, there's 4 other decks. There's 3 other decks. I didn't go back and re-record it because I figured nobody would notice. But now that I'm coming to the end, I'm like, okay, maybe somebody's going to notice. And I just want them to know that I'm sorry.